On the right table, our guest speaker, Dr. Ayotunde Coker. So I'd like to recognize the presence of our past president, Engineer Fatai Ajibade Oke. The chairman of the training, Aken Council Training Committee, Engineer Bendene. The council or former council member, Engineer Akinwole. Yeah, online we have the president of the Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineer, Engineer Taiwo Leba. So I yield the floor to the Aken president, Engineer Kule Adebayo, for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, able coordinator of this great zone of which I belong. And I must say, welcome to our guest speaker in particular. Really nice to see you. And of course, those who are here. I know there are going to be many more by the time we've finished. And I know that with business meetings like this, some people are coming more for the interaction towards the end. So it's probably just my privilege to welcome everybody to this session. It's the very first business meeting for the year. And as it happens, we tend to go around the zones so that we make sure that members meet themselves and they also don't feel left out. The fact that this is happening in Lagos does not in any way reflect that everything is done in Lagos. As we all know, we have so much being done in all the other zones. And the fact that today's topic is really cutting edge in too many ways, because if we were standing here probably 10 years ago, people would ask the question, what is a data center? But now, it's amazing going around the world, you see what is happening. It's absolutely amazing. In fact, you're now getting a lot of communities which are saying, we don't want more of these things. Everywhere you look is data center, So I'm certainly looking forward to listening to this. But let me use this opportunity to just, as it were, take the first opportunity to mention how I am of where this association again has gone, thanks to some of our past leaders and others. But to say that we are looking at a new direction in making sure that it's very, very meaningful to our members. Because as an association, members, we know that our firms are paying in so many ways. Engineering consultancy right now is not in the best of health. It's because partially we're tied so much to the economy and the fortunes of the economy. But even then, even within that, as a profession, I think most professions are struggling. So some of the things we're going to do is to see how we can make sure that we get into much better health. We need to rub minds like we're doing today. We need to get together And one of the other things I'm going to do, and I'm going to stop because today is not for me. I just happen to be in zone one. I will, I hope it will happen to make visits, lots of visits to our member locations. I think a lot of member firms only come to places like this, but nobody comes to them. And my intention is that myself, the expo, wherever possible, will visit firms. And so this is like I'm visiting Arab here now.
You're visiting zone one.
And you see, the benefit of visiting is that you get to know the place, you get to associate, you get to understand what are the capabilities, what is the size, and then you can get to talk about consortium, you can get to talk about collaboration. So I welcome all those to Arab as well. Please, before you leave, if there's anything you need to know about Arab, we're on this floor and 3 other floors, 6 and 7. So you're very welcome if you need to. And for some of you, I'm not looking at the guest speaker now, you can drop a job or two before you go with us. Thank you very much and welcome to this evening's affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my president. Now, the guest speaker, Dr. Ayotunde Coker, is one of the leading players in the development of the data center and digital infrastructure industry in Africa, and was a founder and chairman of an influential industry, African Data Centers Association. Since joining Open Access Data Center, OADC Group, as Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Coker has built OADC to be one of the fastest growing and global award-winning leading brands in Africa, with exemplary global recognition and presence in multiple African countries. In a distinguished international career as a business and technology leader across Europe, USA, and Asia, based in the UK, Dr. Coker held senior executive positions in management, consulting, finance, oil and gas, government as global application portfolio director at BP, it's an oil major, UK government as chief technology officer for criminal justice, group IT director, UK Ministry of Justice, and chair of Her Majesty's Enterprise Architecture Board. Turned to Africa in 2009 as Group Chief Information Officer for Access Bank, and then West Africa CEO for Emerging Markets Payments, now Network International. Prior to OADC, he was CEO at Rack Center Building. He was CEO at Rack Center, building to an African standard setting and household name in Nigeria. His achievements have been recognized by numerous awards, including the Distinguished Manufacturing Alumni Award, Cranfield University in 2020. And in the same year, he was recognized as one of the global top 30 edge computing leaders by Data Economy magazine. Capacity Magazine's Power 100 in Global Digital Infrastructure in 2023, 2024, and 2025. He was recently recognized as top 10 in Middle East and Africa data center industry leaders. He is a fellow of Institute of Directors UK, fellow British Computer Society, and honorary senior member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, Nigeria. A Shell scholar, he gained an honors degree in mechanical engineering from University of South Wales in 1986. During his degree, he had various Shell postings and training in the UK, Shell Centre Lagos, Port Harcourt, Warri, Forcados, and offshore. Sponsored by Ford of Europe, he gained a master's degree from Cranfield University in the UK in 1989, where he won the award from the Institute of Production Engineers. Please, let's welcome Dr. Ayotunde Coker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, in here and also online. It's a real honor to be here to be talking about, history, current reality, future of data centers, connected technology infrastructure really in Nigeria. And it's nice to be amongst engineers. In the career synopsis we had, I really went into IT, information technology, different industries. And over many years, after almost 30 years being away, I came back here as the CIO for a bank, Access Bank, when they were growing out. So I've been in technology, in banking, global insurance, in manufacturing, I've got manufacturing systems engineering, but generally using information technology to transform businesses. Okay. So I got to Nigeria and I said to Access Bank, what's the big issue that you have? And they said, well, IT infrastructure, data center, stuff like that. So as you have in the UK, we outsource stuff, BP, and so on, to co-located data centers. So I said to the bank, why on earth would you want to build a data center? So they said, well, we want people to steal our servers.
Yeah.
And anyway, I found out that you couldn't find a decent data center to co-locate at. So we set about then building one. They've had to go before, it didn't quite work out. It's an engineering issue. It's not IT, it's engineering. Plus all of these power issues, right? Because I remember once the power infrastructure blew up. But when I looked at the root cause, I realized that actually some fundamental engineering errors have been made. From an electrical point of view, it was the mechanical side caused the rupture. Okay? So I went home after having to deal with all of this, trying to give the banking systems up. Because I put myself to the department project, really mechanical engineering. And get your act together, become a mechanical engineer in this place and take charge of infrastructure. So although I was CIO for a bank, a lot of what I did was around engineering, getting connectivity, making sure we could connect branches, realizing that you have to transform and not just look at the constraints you have. You just have to innovate around it. And that's why I coined also the phrase that Africa is a fantastic opportunity to innovate. Because you have obstacles and everything thrown at you. You can either get rolled over and give up, because at the times when I've sat down and done. And then I kind of sleep on it. I wake up in the morning and say that's the next challenge that's the next challenge that you have to overcome. You either get it on it by yourself or you get a wave of interested individuals to corral things and industries to find a solution. And in all of that, we've done many, many world-class things here. The data centers, we worked on the rack center with Arab, top-notch, global standard, top awards, world-class in Nigeria, as good as anywhere. And that's what we do now here. We do data centers that are world-class. From 15, 17 years ago now, where I said, why would you build a data center? No one had a clue. So when I moved on from the bank, I took a role in emerging markets payments and payment processing. And then I decided to take on the executive role at Rack Center. They said, this guy's done data centers, you have to build it. The other interesting thing was, I sat down with a company we worked with, Top Tech at the bank. And I said, we've got to engineer 100% power availability to run it. So workshops, and we came up with the engineering template of what's accepted really by the Uptime Institute now for Tier 3 certification construct based on Africa not having utility to run on. That's one of those, just put your engineering hat on and figure it out. And that's the kind of good thing around here. So what I'd like to do, are you changing these things for me or do I have a thing? No. You change for me. Okay, then next slide. So if I just do that, just move to the next slide. Let's keep it moving. So I can keep the momentum. Okay. So I'll put in this industrial revolutions in context. What I want to do is talk about a global context of change, juxtapose it around what's been happening in Nigeria. And I'll mix engineering with information technology because it's actually all very, very closely related. Information tech is really dependent on data center and connectivity. And when you really get into it, my job in the last 4 years has actually been very much more of that. And then I'll talk about some of that things around data centers, and then we'll talk about some of the Nigeria things. Let's go on. There you go. Okay. So if you go back at these industrial revolutions, right? The first one was, mechanical production, steam engines, spinning machines, telegraphy, and stuff like that. Okay. Then it took 110 years to get to the second industrial revolution, which brought in electricity, wireless, steel, air travel came in, construction, real next level of industrialization. But that lasted quite a long time, but about 99 years, not much less. Okay. Then that came in around about 1969, actually. So many people with gray hairs in this room have lived through 1, 2, 3, and are existing in a third industrial revolution now, actually. Quite a few. And we are the ones that have lived through the biggest transformation of anything of data and everything else in the entire world since life began. People with gray hairs sitting in this room and online. Reflect on it. But the interesting thing, 36 years, a transformation, technology started to drive us. Went from 2G mobile to 3G, we got robotics, and all of that computing, you remember programmable controllers and all of those things in manufacturing systems, and you could do things straight through processing, technology architecture started to come in. We're all in that third industrial revolution. But look, very short before we then got to the fourth industrial revolution, around about that 2005-ish. Okay, that fourth industrial revolution came in with the internet. That came in late 80s into early 90s. The internet is different from the World Wide Web. It is an internet architecture that allows data to move around with internet and IP protocols, right? That allows flexibility. Although not as efficient as some other earlier protocols for connectivity, it allowed innovation. The World Wide Web then sat on top of that. That came in through the early 90s into the mid 90s, right? Because I remember vividly in 1994, we're saying, okay, I was in an architect technology architect at Capgemini in the UK. And we said, okay, yeah, this World Wide Web, what about it? We need to start to put it together, and that was Web 1. Coming to 2000, we then started to have businesses that ran online. The web had started. Amazon.com, as we know it now, started late 90s, started to innovate with buying books online, just books online, what you could do. And then my role in technology then was building businesses online, moving on to sort of the .com. Okay, to the 2000s, Egbank was the first pure play technology company bank in the UK. I was digital services director there, having been a consultant to them from Capgemini in consulting, and did a lot in transforming business to operate online. Now we're still now really, that's why you saw this was coming up, fourth industrial revolution, which was actually coined by the World Economic Forum that says, okay, yeah, the fourth industrial, it's been around from then. We had Web 1, Web 2, and we started to have advanced robotics, digital twins, that starts been coming up. Okay. So when I did this lecture, was at Cranfield. I actually lecture when I got that award, Distinguished Alumni Award. Okay. So what I said was this, and I'll talk to some of them. My thesis and assertion was that if you have what I called gargantuan data worldwide, the cloud technologies, multi-cloud, the security issues we have now. I'm not talking about it. We've done another lecture on that in security, cyber security, what it is, how it's changed. I call it the yin and yang. There's a good side of that yin and the yang and the bad side. You always make sure the good side is ahead of the bad side. So what's happening with entropy now with the stuff issues that are coming about AI enabled? What you do, and that's what they started to do, you introduce it on the good side to make sure that the bad side gets it. You can overwhelm and protect from the bad side. It's always been there. And these things are coming in multi-cloud environments, big data, huge data, terabytes and petabytes and all of that, with IT systems in bigger and bigger and bigger data centers, and sucks up the power to enable this compute. Artificial intelligence has been around for over 30 years. I remember at Ford, we had a team in the corner, we called them the expert systems team, because we were always pushing, they always had the latest technologies to push the limits of computing so that we could do artificial intelligence. It's been there. And at that time in 2000, December 2000, I talked about AI then. Okay, and I said my assumption was that within 5 years, that coming into 2025, the combination of some of these things will bring about the advent of what we actually will see as the fifth industrial revolution. And do you feel like we're getting into that right now? Self-driving cars are real, right? AI is at different levels. I talk about gargantuan data. Gargantuan is bigger than big, right? And subsea cables that carry so many things across the world. So let's move on. And that's what, all of that will have now to be done with some sustainability and resilience. Okay, let's just come back down to Nigeria. If you look at 60s and 1980s, actually, Nigeria has been in line with technology. But what has happened in the whole world is technology has now been democratized. Mass interconnectivity, you can get access very easily and all of that stuff, right? Before, it used to be the big companies that could afford anything, or they would even build their networks. People like Shell would build their networks from Lagos to Port Harcourt, and really they don't build their own networks anymore. You just buy a network from Glo or from Wyok, right? It's a company and so on, and you interconnect and stuff like that. But they could afford some of the computers. And we've got some people like Tunde Zichi, he used to be at IBM, well in his 70s now. He wrote a book about Nigeria. You have Ernest Ndukwe, have people like in their 70s, who owns Scholar, and we've got some good icons of driving this technology through. And some of these people were celebrated by the IBMs and the NCR. Remember NCR, the NCR building? Of course. There's a bit of NCR here. And the big mainframe computing, people, and now those people with gray hairs will remember punch cards.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And formula translation. It's embedded in engineering. When you learn engineering, mechanical especially, you learn Fortran. It's part of your engineering degree, right? And all of that was happening as we came into the 2000s, right? And we had leapfrog opportunities, especially with, IBM AS400. You go into companies here from Mobile Oil that used to be here and all of that, Shell. They had this AS400 and the digital, the HP 9000. I remember some of these systems. Some of them were pretty advanced, but, limited in certain ways. And then we have the telecom expansion that came in the 2000s, right? And we leapfrogged the world, actually, with mobile telephony in Africa. We also leapfrogged the world in banking enabled. I remember then I consulted for banking and, worked in a bank and knew what was there. I would say to my colleagues in Access Bank that were ahead of Barclays Bank, this is not possible. Nigeria Bank like this. I say, yeah. No, they couldn't do text messaging instant till 5 to 10 years ago. 15 years ago, we were doing it. I had a rule that if you were even in China and you used your card, right, on an ATM, you will get a text alert by the time the cycle transaction time finishes here. They couldn't do that in the US or the UK. So we've had also a transformation. If you look at these timelines, right? Opportunities. Because you see, but data centers were still behind. We weren't doing much here. We're using compute abroad. It's only really in the last 12, 15 years that we've seen the transformation of data centers, with rack center and main one being the real big drivers of scale in data centers. Let's go on. So that gives you a sense of how Nigeria has actually kept up. We have some great banking and electronic technology company. We have Equiano cable landing in here. I'll talk about that in a minute, bringing connectivity here. We know Flutterwave, Paystack. There's solid technology companies that constantly innovate, bringing new solutions to payments processing, and using some elements of AI in that. I think we put in here what people like OPay have been doing, and so on. These are kind of the wave of change. So we've actually sort of, in a way, kept up, right? But you see, it wasn't as pervasive as it was in Europe. But what we're getting right now is now having pervasive, democratized technology. Everybody now has one of these. 2015 was the first time the economies said the shipment of smartphones into Africa for the first time exceeded feature phones. The thing is to make the affordability right, to make it get the adoption, and that's what's been happening. It's just the different levels of smartphone, and that's life. Some people afford nicer cars than others. It's the same thing with phones. And then we're going to see all of this stuff with the hyperscale data centers that are coming in now steadily. South Africa has the biggest footprint of data centers in Africa, over about 50%. The top tier data center countries are South Africa first, Nigeria. Nigeria is developing very, very quickly. There's around about 90 to 100 megawatts of data center capacity in process in different stages. Around Lagos is the digital hub. Well ahead of, you might think, Kenya. Nigeria is way ahead of Kenya. Egypt actually in scale, Kenya more in innovation, Morocco. Those are the tier ones, right? But Nigeria is way up there, and it's the development trajectory is significant. Okay, let's go. So when you look at these waves, you have these waves of change inside the industrial revolution, right? They come into electricity, they come into mass production, oil economy, all the AI platforms start to come in, and this is that wave I'm talking about that's going to take us right through into the what I call the fifth industrial revolution. And one day Trump will say the fifth industrial revolution is here, and the whole world say yes. It's a kind of stuff assertion that could be happening. Next one, please. Okay. How does this all work in a global context? Because Nigeria is inside that global context. Okay. You have all these points where you have points of sort of technology activity. There's some, I keep seeing how Nigeria moves. Okay, you have a cloud computing ecosystem. You have a whole range of subsea cables that go around the world, terabits and terabits of data that connects the world. You have these content distribution systems that make sure that when you click and you're watching a film, right, it manages and distributes the content. So all of these things sit in data centers all over the place. That is private cloud, public cloud, and so on. This is happening now with what we're doing concurrently with the world. But there's some gaps we have. You talk about NVIDIA GPU stuff that enables AI to work. We've had a problem that the demand has been so high that Africa got left behind. Everybody was satisfying the big demand from Europe and Asia, and we were screaming, we are ready for GPUs, right? It's changed now. It's gone beyond NVIDIA. Have a company called Grok, the Q, not the K. And you have AMD now doing the GPUs. Actually, GPU stands for graphics processing unit. It's technology that intense processing that you need for graphics got expanded and built to get very, very high performance chips beyond what we've ever known. But the compute is so high that it's sucking a lot of energy. Let's keep going. Right? And you come around to these things that I talk about, the 4IR technologies, which is now driving us into the next stage of industrial revolution. Primarily the key things that we have been coming in. Blockchain, remember blockchain. It's not embedded in everything we do. It's not that it went away. It's now just there, right? You have quantum technologies that will add to what we've been doing with these GPUs, right? Cybersecurity is a special case on its own. That's just a thing that we have to do. You have robotic self-driving cars, autonomous systems, edge computing, doing compute at the point where it's required. And then you have AI, you have generative AI. There's something else also in terms of how AI is coming. Generative AI is, you have the large language models with the learning utilities that drive generative AI. That goes into what we know with what ChatGPT is doing, and Microsoft, what's it called? Yes. But now, the agentic AI is here with us. What is actually going to come to Africa is what's called the small language models with what is the inference layer, is what will come into the data centers here, because they have to be at the point, close to the point of use. And we have the consumptive capability. That means end users. We have lots of end users, lots of smartphones. I'll consume these things at point of use. But it's not just about the phone. The agentic level is either Internet of Things that will allow machine-to-machine talking and stuff like that, or it would be interactive embedded in the human interface, or will be used for machine-to-machine interoperability and all of that. All of that is agentic AI. And you start to see some of those coming with avatars and so on. You see that it's happened over here as well. So the journey of technology in Nigeria has been such that it's brought in, lots of big players. Microsoft's been here for years, IBM, growing, Oracle's growing. We need that next wave of tipping point to hook us up into exactly what's happening, but to the same similar scale to what's been happening globally. And that's why we've been building a lot of data centers. And the company I work for, it's Wire Group, we have connectivity and data centers. We bring those two things together by converged open digital infrastructure, because it has to come together for us to deliver this framework. Next, please. So you see, they're already happening. They just need to come back together. And if you try and find this sort of a broad architectural sort of engineering type look into how to simplify all of this stuff, but they all happen in some layers. I just call them here core digital infrastructure. I can share this so you can, yes. You have the core content generator layers, the video content, what you get from people who do content and so on, right? Google, Instagram, and that. This is where you then plug in artificial intelligence. What is now going to be more the agentic layer here? I call them the content actors. And all of the things you see here day to day, what we now take for granted in terms of how we access this. And many, many more people have so many more devices per person. I'll talk about in a minute. Let's roll on. I'll speed it, right? And so you have a digital economy where everything sits in the data center somewhere locally in the whole world. It's a distributed system. Connectivity allows you to do that and it drives some of the solutions we have in agricultural manufacturing, right? You have to have a secure layer on financial institutions. They've been the real drivers, but you then have smart grids as well. that we need to have. Nigeria is going to pivot very quickly into smart grids. We're just getting there. The power issue. I don't know how many power ministers will need to achieve it, but you would see that kind of innovation. So there's this kind of broader architecture view that you can look at in a bit more detail. Let's go forward. Right? Okay. And if you look at this from an engineering point of view, it's a great opportunity for engineers because the more distribution we have in data centers, it brings in civil engineering, it brings in mechanical engineering, it brings in electrical engineering, it brings in interconnectivity, it brings in the frameworks you need for ecosystems that connect lots of different networks that allows the pairing, internet exchanges, and so on to operate within those data centers. And we're starting to build them out there. And some people say, I'm going to build a data center. It's a bit like building a bridge. Something else, just build a bridge, right? It's a bit more complex. But if you're the expert, it's just what you do. It's a bit like some of these things look easy when the experts do it, until some people who think they know, they try to. And it's the same thing with data centers. So the kind of engineering competence you have is actually quite special. Okay, but it is engineering that underpins everything we do in technology. And you see the patterns of what we've been having with telecommunications, VSATs coming into submarine cable systems. Here we got the Google Equiano cable, and so on. Okay. Okay. And what's driving this? You have these trends. If you look at sort of globally, we're having more internet users globally, right? 4 billion to 6 billion in just a short time. If you look at devices and connections, so we've got 21 billion devices and connections, which means that each person is generally walking around on average. There's the averages and there's, three devices. You have this that you carry around. I have a computer and a tablet in my bag. It is people will dance across channels and devices to meet their pattern of life over there at that point in time, right? And that's what's happening here as well. Huge increases in download speeds and content being a significant increase, video viewing and so on. Video viewing in Nigeria is now going off the chain. If you look at the internet exchanges, it shows the trajectory of Nigeria. Nigeria is now around 2 to 2.5 terabits of internet exchange traffic. South Africa is about 4, 5. Nigeria was way behind. The trend of internet traffic in Nigeria is now going towards South Africa. That's a very, very important content reference point of data. Let's keep going. I'm conscious of time now. And you can juxtapose that into Nigeria. Nigeria actually has 144 million, 45 million internet subscribers, despite industry statistics being cleaned in terms of what you could call a phone connection, right? A dead connection wasn't classified. So Nigerian internet subscribers reduced. This is more than any country in Europe, really, in terms of absolute numbers. Right? If you look at broadband penetration, it's about 50%, but the 50% of Nigeria is bigger than many, many countries in the world. 120 million. It's kind of not like 130 million, right? Look at that change in time. I've always tracked this thing over the last 10 years. We were kind of behind, then we caught up with Germany, 98 million, where we had about 40% and so on. But look at that shift. And this is what's been shifting in the data, underlying data, that indicates our use of technology in the country, right? And if you look at that, look at the trends that we're seeing here, okay? But most of it is actually, you see what you have is smartphones, that's non-smart smartphones. Our connectivity is really driven mostly by what we have with mobile connectivity on the country. But nevertheless, those are the things that underpin traffic that we use. The important thing is that we get meaningful broadband that gets out there. And that's why you have the government initiative now for 90,000 kilometers of fiber technology. If you look at this growth snapshot, right? Active subscriptions, it came down because of that cleaning I talked about, but that's still pretty high. Tele-density is actually down because a lot of the false positives again got cleared up by the Nigerian Communications Commission. So it's much more real now. But still, if you look at 78% of Nigeria, that's talking about 160 to 170 million of people connected to the internet. So it puts Nigeria right up there in that huge transition we've seen, especially in the last 5 years, including internet usage, right? You know, so each of these industries now have the different usages, right? And if you look at it, each of these have technology and engineering inside them in terms of where the opportunities are, where the engineering community and consulting community can pivot into. I used to be CTO for criminal justice, and before we had Zoom, we had virtual courts at the time, 2007, 2008, to streamline the workflow right across the whole of criminal justice. Now it must be really exciting being able to do a lot of those things. You know, same thing with agriculture. There's a huge amount of technology in agriculture. I talk about smart grids, energy. That's not there yet. It's coming. Education, smart cities. Education is going to be absolute hit, and health. Those are big movers of tipping point in the country, right? You know, so you have a whole range of examples here of using technology into engineering, into farming. I just brought this into play. That it's not one thing, but there is the mix and juxtaposition and the meeting point or intersection point of information technology, technology infrastructure, actually, digital infrastructure, and the technologies we use and certain usage scenarios in real life, right? So you're going to have certain levels of impact, right, in terms of how it impacts efficiency. I picked this up from a PwC study. You know, it's going to impact different aspects of social and so on technology. But what I was saying earlier on, at Ford, I was doing engineering of technology, right? Technology of engineering. I ran the client server platform across Europe, and we will come with solutions that will save 100 head counts, and 5 minutes over for me, right? And we thought we got rid of the heads through automation. What happens is because of some of the corporate knowledge, institutional knowledge they had, contextual knowledge, they go out into a pool, and some of them will decide, oh, it's time, I'll take my money and retire. It's a choice. Other ones, they get filtered back into new technology areas. And that's a recycle that's going to happen here. And so people think AI is going to take my job. No, actually, AI gives you more choice. It allows you to do a lot more. What presentations that would take you a week to do, now you could do in 2 hours, 3 hours. We're talking about when you get your inspiration from the night before. And if you have a nice relationship with AI, you're the knowledge base, real knowledge base. Because I say to people, it's not when people will say to me, when I was in BP in 2005, when can AI do that? When we had this problem and we had to fix it this way. No, AI can't give you that context. However, it can help you put things into a context you create because you always had it. Or you can change context through AI. And you just have to be the person in control of that. And if you don't embrace that change proactively, then it's going to change you. You know, it's the same thing with when you look at different industries in terms of levels of impact like this, looking a bit more closer to the realities in Nigeria. And some of these statistics were pulled out through quickly by AI. I want to see this, and you validate it as well, so you're not getting a lot of hallucination hitting you. You know, the change of company value, the scene of company valuations is changing as well. If you look at the global scene, it's now dominated not just by. If you look at 2005, it was people like conglomerates, you know, and so on. And then you come to 2015, and it's dominated by the Apple's, Alphabet, Microsoft. Then you have Exxon that used to be up there at the top, you know, changed, right? Now, look at the population here. Now you have NVIDIA. They're starting to get other levels of companies taking the top 5 because that's the new technology-led valuations that we're now seeing globally. But if you put that into Nigeria, you find that that's not quite getting there yet, but you see a pattern starting to emerge, right? You see, it's starting to come through. These do that through technology, and the more these guys use technology, the more they'll hang in there. But you soon see the OPAs, so on, coming up. Just watch. I didn't bring in the sort of transaction numbers. I thought about it. So last minute, it's between the transactions those new banks are doing online. It's just really amazing. Okay. Yeah, that's the current situation. Let's get on to the Nigerian context. I've talked about this. Let's move on. Okay. Yeah. So if you look, right, you're getting some huge shifts in terms of transactions by exactly this money point and OPay. These two are market changing things, right? Because they focus on customer experience and using more AI technology in between. And the number of transactions that you see processed here is significant. It also uses digital infrastructure to an AI within what's being used. And now you're not seeing that agentic AI in use here. And of course, we now have, where we had older ones, NCI Nigeria. Times is doing pretty well. CWG here is on the stock market, eTransact stock market. We are having the technology companies. Tech was hardware, let's assume the CEO passed away quite a few years ago now, but it's still, but that's not at the hardware level. So we have our own patterns here that are emerging with respect to technology leadership. And very close to end now, if you look at us on the subsea cable history, the first one we had was the SAT3, because everything used to be VSAT those days, right? So SAT3 came in on 120 gigabits per second. That was huge then, right? It was huge. The whole of Nigeria running on this cable. The main one, then it had problems, right? We started to outgrow it. The main one came in 2010 with 1.92 terabits, and Funke worked on SAT3 as well before, right? And then Glow1 came very soon after to add that capacity. And Nigeria has been sinking and eating up the capacity ever since. Then WAX 2012, 5 terabits, the ACE 5.12 terabits. See what happened. Equiano came in 2022, which lands into the open access data center here in Lekki, right? 144 terabits. Add all of these together, look at the change. Step change just like that. We now have 2 Africa on our shores in Lagos and also Akwa Ibom, and that is even higher. So within 3 years, we now have more capacity than we would ever have linking Nigeria to the world and vice versa across Africa. So it gives you a sense of now we have this enabling underlying capacity where that will take us. Every time we say, oh, international capacity is going to go off, why would you localize data? We won't use it. Every time you localize data, you need more data. We start to eat up all of this capacity. When some of these cables got taken out 2 years, 2024, we, as WIOC and OADC, we restored Nigeria into capacity into the whole of Equiano. Nigeria didn't suffer as much as many countries because within 48 hours, we restored around about 2 terabits of capacity, hanging capacity. And we restored another 2 terabits into this within a week. The OADC data center was running Nigeria actually, and most of West Africa for a couple of months, okay? And that shows you I'll just talk about WIOC now. It's the parent company of open access data centers. It started in connectivity, the easy cable here, then started to buy capacity on the subsea cables, those ones I talked about. It connects Africa to the world. We have points of presence in UK, Marseille is a big concentration point and big data center locations, built Southern Africa connectivity with fiber. And now we'll be moving into building out Nigeria's own open access long distance fiber here. There's a lot we're doing there. And we have a data center now, open access data centers. A data center in Lagos here as our flagship. Kinshasa, the first they got going there. It's developing nicely. We have 3 in Joburg, 3 in Cape Town, 3 in Durban, all linked to key points of connectivity. And we have 40 other data centers in South Africa. We call them edge smaller data centers. We'll do the same thing in Nigeria. We're looking at that and other countries. It just shows the kind of interconnection that we now have, right, across the continent. So we had the Equina, which was really the only thing that could drive Lagos into Cape Town when those cable breaks happened. So you didn't really notice it because in the back end it was restored, right? Because we had back capacity. Okay. And so with open access data centers coming in, we had a wild group. My boss is the person who started this, the group CEO. I run open access data centers for Africa. I'm based in Lagos. Lagos is the best place to be based actually in Africa. It's a lot for logistics and everything. And OA Fabric allows you to connect from where you are here as a business direct into the global cloud platforms using that connectivity network. We have our data centers. So if you were wanting to connect to Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, you can do that. However, we also enable direct connect to local clouds and other Africa clouds. So it gives an architectural capability to support the digital economy. And we have open access metros. We're building metro fiber to the house, fiber to business across Lagos. We're doing something with Abia State now, expanding to some of Port Harcourt. So we will wire up key cities in Nigeria with open access fiber connectivity. So ISPs don't have to build their own networks. They can ride on what you do on the line network. They differentiate through the service they deliver to the point of use, the quality of service, transformation of client experience, and so on. And I think that is it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coker. It was quite an interesting lecture, education, and I've learned more. Before we go into the question and answer session, I would like to thank the firms that made today's business evening possible. I want to start by thanking Obiarop and Partners, Jojo and Partners, ACMP, OJ&T, Consulting Engineers, Bill Safe, Nigeria Limited, and Farmers Global Consulting. Thank you very much to our sponsors. Now, questions. If you have any questions, you want to take from online first or on the audience? So maybe if anybody has any question?
Yes.
Yes. Introduce yourself and
yeah, all right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bolaji. I am a digital consultant for ARO, and I wanted to ask a question. So, my question is basically around open access, and I remember, so I want to give you context. So, I remember a few weeks ago, I was in the first chat session with Ian, right? And then there was a question that someone came up with. It was like, we need more access to compute resources to be able to do a lot of innovation for the AI or AI agents and all of that. And then he was talking about how NVIDIA has come to me in the past, and he was telling me, oh, you want to give more people access to compute resources, and later, 2 or 3 months after, the clients will tell you that, oh, you know what to do with compute resources, you know how to use it, and all of that. So I wanted to know what has been your perspective and your experience in terms of adoption from young people in terms of innovation, compute resources, data centers, and data center infrastructure to media benefits. I also wanted to know if there are any educational initiatives for video open access data center that would help young people to be more knowledgeable about how to use this resources, how to use all these things that are available. And also, finally, in the spirit of the education, if maybe for some of us who are here who are really interested in this, we have an access to Tor, Africa's fastest growing data center.
Okay, yeah, sure, we can arrange that. Have a good educational session to tour. You see, there are different layers when you peel it on what drives the AI stuff, right? There's a huge change in data center engineering right now. IT racks used to be about 3 kilowatts, and now if you saw just about 5 years ago, a rack with 8 kilowatts was quite dense. Now we're seeing normal racks coming out 8 kilowatts. Then it's much more normal. You're now going towards 10 kilowatts, 40 kilowatts per rack. So we've got an expansion going on that says the trajectory is to 24 standard hyperscale density of 4 stages, 6 megawatts each, right? Over time. We're changing it now to say, actually, it could be 30 to 35 megawatts because AI is coming. So at that infrastructure level, you now have very dense racks and the technology of how you have to make it happen and cool effectively. We're already planning for water to keep cooling, and it's hybrid. Oh yeah, it's if you can't do that now, you can't say you're AI ready. It's just up there. You have to be able to cool that kind of density. So there's the infrastructure level of change that we're facing, and it has an impact on power. Where do you get this power from? It's something constantly on my mind in terms of where's gas coming from, what IPP do I need to build in like 2 to 3 years time. So there's that aspect of engineering. Now, the other aspect you're talking about with youngsters being able to then leverage that. What's happening with that is that we're now seeing not just, someone says I'm going to do GPUs. You're now seeing GPU as a service, as a baseline for the AI. You now have large companies, they tend to come at 2-3 megawatts each time. There's a reason why I know that, right? And for the inference layer drives through the GPUs and gives the base for the innovation at the agenda. Now, that's where you find a lot of the real sort of software innovation coming in. We don't do that with the infrastructure of the data center. Of course, we have to innovate to enable that. But a lot of that comes out of the innovation you need in terms of how to use the functionality get from inference layer. And the way things are going now, they tend to be built out into these very intensive compute APIs that you can use, an app that you put together and so on. I don't know where that one is, but that's just another layer of it. And I think that's the one you're talking about. Yeah. Okay. We'll arrange something.
Yeah,
good evening, everyone. My name is Engineer Dr. Charles Belede. I'm from American, Nigeria. Thank you, Dr. Coker, for your well-articulated lecture. My question is thus: now, because of the capital-intensive nature of building the center, is it possible for two stakeholders? By two stakeholders, for example, is it possible for people like firms like EcoBank and which other bank again? Union Bank and another bank to come together and have one data bank? Data center for optimization, just to optimize costs. Will it be possible for them to come together, think together, and have a common source for
their own use? Different industries are talking about how you share infrastructure and so on. Just find a co-location data center and go there. Then you can come to and fund. It's very capital intensive. So they can bring in the funding to fund the people who know how to do, whose their business is to build data centers and run data centers, to share their assets into. But the key thing that's linked to their own business is to be part of the funding of it. but not that they'll build it and own it. The build it and own it age has gone. I was going from the early 2000s and so on. When I was at BP, we moved own data centers across the world, 450 data centers or thereabouts, a bit more, to 3 mega data centers that were outsourced co-location in Chicago, London, Singapore. I was responsible for the application and transformation and all of that. So we didn't own that infrastructure. The connectivity ones that we had, we sold them out to people who do connectivity, and we buy the connectivity off them. It's the same thing that's been happening now. So better for the banks to stick to their own knitting if they need to, because you're right, the cost of the capital expenditure is high. For every megawatt shell of data center, you build on average about 10 million. If you're not yet refined in the process, it could be about 12, 15 million. If you then get pretty good, it could be 9, 8 million, right? It's a lot of money per megawatt. When we're now talking about 24 megawatts would therefore be 240 million. That's a lot of capital expenditure over time. So you need big providers, funders with big pockets and big good patient capital. And that in itself is a skill. And that's actually also not easy to pursue. So there are many difficulties around you have that require a skill in data centers. You have to have the skill to find the funding. You have to have the skill to build it effectively. You have to have the skill to build the brand so people can trust you to sell the space you have. You have to have the skill to find the power. So it's a complicated mix of skills you need to drive these things at scale.
If I can just ask add on, is it any different in Nigeria from global in terms of, you talked about costs of
Yes, it is, because we don't get the same cost of capital that they have over there. However, it's for instance, right? We didn't have the ecosystem, the value chain, the supply chain capacity build capability to do this, but we've changed that in the last 10, 15 years. Remember you and I had a conversation a long time ago of what we're doing with Arab, and we say, let's do this together in a way where we build local capacity. And that was why the intention was for it to be through here than brought here. And that has changed a lot in the last 10 years, of having local capacity and capability in all the things about electrical, mechanical, the disciplines you require for cabling, operationalizing, and all that. A lot of that is available here now. You see, what I call it leadership context. We have fantastic young talent. What you need to do is to create the context for them to grow, for them to learn, and for them to become world class. And we do them here. But it's taking time, and we need to continue to do it. It comes down to other aspects of things like financing, things like supply chain. We built data center in Congo, no supply chain. We had to drive everything from South Africa and Nigeria. Actually, Nigeria is also. In fact, some of my people feel actually some of the things we have here now, you better just do it here. It's better than going to South Africa. But Congo, we had nothing. It was difficult, but we got it done. But we're starting to 5 years behind now to build that capability. It's with funding to get the right of. It's improving in some way because a lot of the global DFIs now also see that to drive infrastructure up in Africa, because it transforms economies as well, right? Not about the business of capital. It transforms economies and livelihoods. We have to find the right kind of funding mechanisms that makes it more competitive and efficient to provide that kind of funding. So it's behind in many ways, but it's shifting and moving in the right direction.
Before I go back, the co-location of like Engineer Belede was saying, you say that two banks, if they agree before they can share data center, So you mean there are no, this story is talking about banks. You mean there are no, the companies don't co-locate in like you have, for example, telecoms now, you have many companies sharing the same mass. Yeah. So what about the data centers? Is that not,
It's
or is that the
yes.
future? Is it,
What's happening is you haven't had MTN and Airtel come together to say, oh, let's build this mass and we'll share it together. No. You have IHS that came in as a co-location partner and they co-locate with them. Right?
Yeah.
Some of it is shifting with the deal MTN is doing now. It's an interesting one to observe, but you focus on the front end of your business. And then why do infrastructure you don't need to do? It's a distraction. And it sits on your balance sheet, not as an earning asset. There's just a lump of money that actually, when your competitors start to co-locate, have a tidier balance sheet, they're moving that capital to the front end of the business where they turn it around into shareholder value, right? They become much more agile. I wrote a paper that went in more around South Africa. It's quite relevant around it, but it's on LinkedIn, right? Around the rationale of why you should co-locate, especially now in the age of AI. If you want an agile organization, if you want an agile enterprise, you want to be able to move into where you compete. Not that, oh, we have AI. Oh, we need people to figure out how to build AI-capable data centers, cooling. You're now hiring people to think about cooling, water this, all of those things. Your competitors have moved. You're still doing CapEx expenditure of $10 million. Let's say in CapEx expenditure, grow the market. You're taking 6 months to do the supply chain. They've called their co-location partner to say, I need to hook into this AI provider. They've moved on. So the way to strangle and choke in this day and age is for you to start thinking, I want to build my own base infrastructure, whatever the backend is. You need to provide that agility. And if you look at people like OPay and MoneyPoint, right? There's a reason that they are having they're very innovative. They think customer first. What makes that happy? It comes back into agile infrastructure, all of those things, and they move very, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we go on, something that's quick in mind, while Speaker was on, two of our past presidents came in, Engineer Adeola. I would like to recognize and Engineer Bayo Adeola and Engineer Nuruddin Rafidadek. Engineer Bayo is senior in the hierarchy of he was the president before you.
I'm not sure. This is just a contribution, and I'd like to report. In a world where globalization and sovereignty are at loggerheads, and almost everything that a nation has superior over you is being weaponized. And we've been pushed for independence, called for, and therefore this question of co-location, collaboration, Russia, 300 million, frozen by SWIFT, just because it was expected in one country. People have been killed all over the world because their data are universally available outside their sovereignty. Like I said, I don't think that. So cybersecurity, sovereign independence in this world of what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I could do on those two different things a good sort of kind of lecture. So I did one actually not too long ago, the Enterprise Risk Management Association of Enterprise Risk Management Professionals. And what I drove is I gave a bit of a global background context like this in terms of what's been happening with security as well. But what it came down to was I described it earlier on, I think, before you came in. The yin
No.
and the yang. Oh, you had that. Okay. So what it is it constantly changes. If you're an enterprise and you think, we've done our security project, it's done, it's finished. It never finishes. There's another innovation ready to come and penetrate you, to breach you, to cause you problems. It's people, it's a whole mix of things, right? So you always have to be sure that you have an architecture, not just enterprise or physical, an architecture, people, the whole thing, everything around cybersecurity. But you always have to make sure that the good side, you do it better than the bad side if you're doing it and stay ahead. It's also something you have to do.
Sorry that I'm feeling the pressure to say perhaps that's not my question.
I think I might get your question that cyber war crime, is it?
Is the underlying philosophy
Mm-hmm.
of independence, the underlying.
Oh, I'll come to that one now.
Because that's
Yes.
the bedrock.
Mm.
For instance, there's one rascal called North Korea. They can't touch him, but any other person they can touch.
Mm.
Google is not in China. Therefore, there's only so much you can do in invading China. Singapore kept them out of his network until he was strong enough to take them out. But here we are, where we are always looking for them.
Mm.
We will build a company to 200, then they buy it.
Mm.
Our own growth is stunted.
Mm.
They just take it over. We don't grow anymore. We are so happy with $200 million. We are living well and buying cars. But the underlying growth that should come from. So it's the underlying philosophy that I'm actually. That's why I said it was a contribution to.
Yeah, I could contribute an aspect, because what you're talking is pretty profound in many ways for the country and stuff like that, and strategy. And however, I'll just come to one aspect of it. Sovereignty, you said. It's data sovereignty. Okay. We've got a lot of African data hosted in Europe and US. Okay. But when we talk about data sovereignty and you really push it, we didn't have the data centers to put the data in.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to build the digital infrastructure that allows you to do that. The other thing is that the layers of data sovereignty, it used to be kind of okay, US, Europe data would be in the US and stuff like that. And some things happened that made Europe pull back and say, you know what? We will now enforce our GDPR and sovereignty significantly more. What happened? Lots of international companies started building data centers in Europe to keep the data there. It's starting to happen in Africa. It's at different countries. That's why I say it's another thing you can talk about, so Africa. So I'll keep it, talk in detail, but I'll keep it high level. Nigeria is actually quite advanced in many ways. They've got NDPR, was modeled around GDPR, but it's also very practical in realizing. 10 years, 6, 7 years ago, I talked about sovereignty. They say yes, but then when we talk to rules and all of these people, in government, they'll say, well, you don't have the data centers. So we have to get the data centers to make sure that we also have the right policies for them to come here. But we also have to home grow our own cloud companies that they can provide the infrastructure here to allow the data to be held here. But you see, a big country like Nigeria can do that because it's got scale. South Africa can, it's got Papier, right? There are only about 6 or 7 countries in Africa that have levels of sovereignty and data protection regulation, really. But it's growing. There was a Malabo Accord about 10 years ago that started to drive towards more Pan-Africa data sovereignty, just like they have in Europe. But in Africa, it's fragmented. So there's a push towards having an element of African data sovereignty, or perhaps it'll be regional. But then that also begs the question, what level of trust do you have, even in Africa, to say, okay, I'll let my own data be there? But actually, for practical reasons and growth reasons, it's better to have a Pan-African data sovereignty framework. Because why would I usually go to Lome and put a data center there? Locally, it doesn't have a scale of it. However, if we have a common data sovereignty framework, we could put 100 megawatt there to serve Nigeria. because they have the right level of power, they have connectivity, they have good governance, they have this, that, and the other. That investment would go there. Right now, it won't, because it could serve Nigeria, but you need to just get it's moving in that direction. At least it could be regional, ECOWAS, SADC, and so on, right? So you'll see that emerge. But you're right, sovereignty is become an even bigger issue globally, not just for Africa, but in a way, at that level of scale, Africa is behind. There's a lot of work I've actually been personally pushing over the years that we have to move in that direction. Africa Data Center Association, the Smart Africa organization, which is actually quite sophisticated at bringing countries together across Africa to move towards us having better sovereignty. So at least we optimize between our data that's here in Nigeria and what's kept elsewhere. The other clever thing that's being done by the NITA and so on is to say, we're practical in the fact that we live in a global data ecosystem. So we need to understand our data classifications of what is of a certain type that absolutely has to be here, that could be more regional, could be global for us to understand it. I think that's a clever, more practical approach, right? Because if you just say everything comes into this country, then it's probably won't happen. The other layer of what you were talking is too profound beyond my job grade, probably.
Thank you. Thank you. Engineer, President.
Engineer, I served under him assistant secretary sec. So he had let out what I wanted to say. Actually, I was talking about security, and now you can help as security, because we are going deeper and deeper into the IT jungle. And like every jungle, there's insecurity. That's what I was saying. That is what I said. So,
and you are seeing a push more towards national security operating centers, right? Because there's a layer you need to protect at that level. When I was CTO at Criminal Justice in the UK, I would have a weekly report actually in terms of intrusion detection, protective monitoring. I was interested in there's a huge amount of data. Where are we getting attention from? What kind of attention is it? What protection do we have? What likelihood is it at a higher level? To say if you protect it there, the likelihood for you to then come in and deal with it at a lower level is less. Okay, so you protect at layers, but you have to look at the data. You have to understand and analyze the data in detail and keep a step ahead of, and the patterns shift around the world. You know where it's coming from. Sometimes they try to fool you, but you have to make sure that you can outfool them before they try to fool you. To think I've got something coming from Bulgaria, but it looks like it's coming from, Yaba.
Yeah. Can I just add though that separate from cybersecurity, we all hear of situations now where the whole of Heathrow or Gatwick is down based on just data. So there's a nightmare that some of us wake up to one day just to find that everything has crashed. You don't even know now how much is in your bank, you don't know your phone number, you don't know even your wife's name, because everything is now data and it's available. How does resilience come into this? And are we going to get to a point where there is going to be a major problem?
It's part of what you were talking about, sir, in terms of that level of security, that you can have cyber warfare, and that it's a reality. That's why I also talked about in different layers of having, say, national security operating centers. And you just get your protections at different levels. Also, there has to be a significant amount of people education, right? The custodian of your own personal security is now very, very important. It's a bit like, you come to cross the road, you look left, you look right as a child before you cross, they teach you. It's the same thing with tech now these days. You have to understand what you can give, what you can't give, how you interact with these things. But it's not just that. I mean, education, enterprises have to educate staff constantly You think you've gone through a round of education, and then you realize you need another round of education. So it just doesn't stop, right? Because it keeps changing. However, it's not just that. The speed of change is mind-boggling. Really. I'll give you one subtle example. In the 2000s, I had a time with internet change and changes in the industry where I'd hold a job for about 2 years, something shifts and I take a job 2 years and stuff like that. You might be speaking in an interview and you say, what did you achieve? You did this, that, and the other. And maybe someone maybe not quite as advanced as you are, right? In innovation and speed of doing things. So you can't have achieved that in 2 years, really. I look at these people like, really? Am I having the right conversation here? Because I'm moving at that pace. That's why I've been able to achieve that 2 years here and 2 years there, and the pace, and because technology now allows you to also innovate yourself and achieve a huge amount. Previously, if you're not doing the same presentation, someone tells you to come and do one presentation this week, a totally different one, and so on. You wouldn't be able to. But these days, you can move and fit it in while you're coming here. You're keeping in touch with staff. Things don't stop. You keep changing, and that's the new pace of change. So some people who don't, and it's the same. There's a good side of that change that's just mind-boggling. The bad that you described, but there's a good side in that you're able to drive and turn around and achieve so much more. Than these days. Do you have a PA to book your flights to? I'd rather do it myself.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand my own pattern of what it is. And now I can even find out before a travel agent can what kind of choice I have if I want to go to Guangdong in China. Right? The tools now, electronic, they can use it to find it out yourself. There are solutions that you can say, okay, given this, can you just get me a route that is quicker that you do it yourself than your travel agent can? And you have a problem and you need to shift something, you're now waiting for some agent to call and stuff like that. You don't have the time. You need to just press your button, look at your choices. This is what I want to do. That's complete. I paid for it, done. And that's the way the world is now.
Any question? Yes. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the great presentation stuff. So, because it's a business evening, so my question is going to be towards like business strategy. So, from one of the data you presented, we were able to show how the global economy is changing from like 2015 to 2025, where we have companies that are now leading the economy, like Nvidia, Alphabet, and all now being of labor market leader. But it's interesting to me to see companies like JP Morgan Chase that were still able to maintain the staff where they were in 2015 and where they are now. Because I know for business, there's one thing of all business are striving to be like the top one, top 10. But I don't think there's nothing wrong in you being like the top 20, provided you can maintain that space for a long period of time. So what was JP Morgan able to do for them to maintain that space? From the data,
yes, they've been investing in technology hugely for the last. I worked on a project with JP Morgan in 1998. Yeah, I was in London. It was around the global regulatory management system and stuff like that, right? Funny thing. So we needed to get 3 terabytes of data to hold this stuff then. And so because you need to know your mark to markets, you need to know everything globally at a point, press a button, done, right? It was about £120,000 to buy 3 terabytes of data, and they bought it then. So a lot of these companies I talked about have their own approach to investing in technology. Other ones at the time, Merrill Lynch, examples, they were looking at how do they now pivot and drive out new technologies, new shifts. You always in leadership have to understand when to reinvent yourself. So these companies, that's why I mentioned it on a couple of companies, there's technology behind that allows them to have that competitiveness. And if you look at the investments they've had, it's not just over the last 5 years, those older companies, they've been doing it for years. And that's what's now paying off for them to have the kind of technology platforms that enables their agility, enables their shareholder value to stay at the top there.
Any other? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah. I know it's difficult to pronounce. Nigeria. So, I'm from Dalal M&E. We are specialized in designing, fabrication, and installation of MEP services around Nigeria and Africa. So, my question is: in climate places, tropical climate, I mean places like Nigeria, non-stop innovations for cooling systems are being adopted and updated on daily basis to improve energy efficiency in data centers. So, based on your perspective and on this intersection we are trying to do, because we are very much involved in IT, like cooling and energy supply and fire protection. So, what is your advice for a contractor aspiring to match global standards and collaborating with global trends?
Yeah, it's something I've always called it's a more difficult innovation for us here in Nigeria, on the equator, countries on the equator, include Singapore, it includes places that would be sort of warmer as well, Atlanta, Georgia. They also have data centers, right? Because there's something you need to be actually close to the point of use, where you have scale. Not everything can be built and hosted in the north of Canada or Norway, where you have more. But the demand for heating and cooling now is so high that actually it used to be okay, but the benefit you have about, say, being in Norway is now benefits, but not quite as stark as it used to be. So it forces us here to be very innovative. And we're very innovative in the way we address the power utilization effectiveness, right? Because of what I call the 1990 challenge. You're right. 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 90% humidity. But you still need to achieve a PUE of 1.5, 1.4, right? You worked on that. And it was an innovation, but it's possible. I mean, the rack center thing is targeting PUE of about 1.4. Over here in Africa. But it's a whole thing, not just about a cooling system. You have to innovate it through the entire chain of everything. And your effectiveness of how you manage the airflows, your computer CFD engineer, look at CFD. There's a lot that's coming with CFD now, because it's quite complicated. And that computational flow dynamics of how it works, how to optimize is so important to achieve those PUEs. But in this environment, you have to really innovate with how you cool, how you move air around, and how you optimize your data room temperatures and effectiveness, because it's so hot and so humid.
Any other questions? There is nothing online. Thank you, Dr. Coker.
So I think we've had a really nice session. To be very honest with you, personally, I could just sit here and continue this. And it's not because you're a great speaker, you brought anything, but the fact of the matter is, this is something which we're all seeing. You've taken us through the period of time. You reminded me of the punching of cards and Fortran 4 and all that. And I think we're a very privileged, or you might say we're a disadvantaged generation, where we've seen so much change in our time that it's almost as if, what's next? Where are we going to go to? Because just as you said, to just say for I equals 1, 2, so go, you had to stay, you punch, put them together, put it overnight.
You took it to a building.
Yes, you took it to a building. You waited overnight, then you got it back. And then you found out, oh, you didn't put a single one particular point there. And so you wait for the next night to put it there. And now we got to a point where you have cars being, driverless. You have so many things. I mean, on this is actually a fact. On Sunday, I was driving, and I'd keyed in my phone with the, and it just there and then it just told me, oh, this is Copilot. No, it was actually the other one. Not even ChatGPT. But anyway, and it was saying, I just asked for a direction and said, is there anything else you want? And believe it or not, for the next 15 minutes, I was having a conversation. I was the only one in the car. And I said, yes, my Fitbit panel seems to be loose. He said, oh, this is quite common, but it's just the adhesive around the thing that needs to be redone. But tell me, how bad is it? Has the top come up or has this? And we were having a conversation. I hardly realized that there wasn't actually a human being next to me. Wow. Because it had also told me where I can get it done and do you want me to give you directions to place? And as it's going, it will also have told me that actually better move fast because they're closing at 5 o'clock. So we've actually come, and it's quite significant. And what I said about reliance, we are consulting engineers. There are some people who probably genuinely feel that we may have significant problems if we don't innovate, because all those things that we used to use, I'm a consultant. What really am I? I have some information. That's really what I am. As a consultant, I know something you don't know, so you consult me.
You have knowledge.
Yes.
Yes.
And now,
you own the context.
yes.
It's more than information.
Yes.
Yes.
Knowledge. But very, very rapidly, we're seeing that now being able.
That's AI.
It's rapidly now available, because what I spent a month researching and writing on, AI will summarize very quickly and tell the other guy this. Just the basic points. And we're now on the same pedestal.
Almost.
So almost. Almost. So I mean, it's really been very, very useful. I want to say thank you so much indeed. One of the things I think we as consulting engineers need to do is to listen to some of the things you said about Africa and innovation, that there are so many opportunities, but you just need to be keeping up or moving ahead of time. We have a little just something to remind you. I'm sure you have many of these in Cranford. This one doesn't have maybe all that Cranford gave you, but it's this is from Arcade. It's presented to you as guest speaker. The first business evening for this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. There was a question online. On the educational side, students use AI for assignments, term paper, and in writing some lectures. Use AI in writing a manuscript. What is your advice on this? And I want to add to that and just simply ask you also, are we likely to run out of the desire to learn a lot of skills? Even writing, reading, everything.
Yeah, it's true, because how often do you think, gosh, I can't quite write like I used to? You're typing. You can sign your signature because you have to. Try and write a page. Don't just handwrite.
But do not
You're
try.
thinking,
Because you have that,
I used to be able to write. Right? Things change, right? And sometimes the thing about leadership or different aspects of life is understanding when to reinvent yourself or when the context has changed, right? And a lot of leaders don't realize that. And I think there's also in answering this question. So I'll go back. Sometimes the story is what's good to answer the question. And this one resonates with some people here. So remember slide rule?
Of course.
Aha, yes. So we have these are the people who've lived through number 2, number 3, number 4 industrial revolution, right? 7-figure tables. So before they allowed that, you have to move from the slide rule. Then I remember it was late 70s, mid 70s that you were able to use 4-figure tables, not slide rule. Yeah, I'm kind of showing my age now, right? So,
you now.
yeah, so then you get to a point where I remember then calculators started to come out. And it was about would you use calculators and everything, right? But university early 80s, I wasn't allowed to use but I did. There was this Texas instrument, a slide thing that you could program. So I had my own ways of exam thing. I would have all the engineering programs in terms of how the outlook. I'll write a little script on this thing that will come up with some answers. It gives me a pattern. I can't take it into exam because but I could use it beforehand. Okay, so you couldn't use. By now we've gone beyond 4-figure tables now. Different early 80s, and then you started to have desktop computers. I remember the first CAD programs that came out mid 80s. You had computers that would do the CAD, but it was kind of clunky, right? But now you use, and some people had to actually still draw it and everything in exam rooms. But now you can use your, what's it called, mini-CAD or AutoCAD.
Yeah, what is the one that you used to have tapes? Was on the tapes to segment. Okay, but.
So, I'm kind of telling a story of the journey right now. And the points of change to the point where you have a computer, you now have a desktop computer, and education shifts to play into that. See, what's happening with AI is that, you see, I talk quite a bit about sort of AI and other aspects of AI, the AI journey. That kind of technologies that I believe you and I juxtapose it on things and examples. And you see, when you think about it, in as much as so much has changed, everything has stayed the same. So if you don't get primary school right, okay, however, given those things, you adopt everything else. So what I see happening with AI right now is it's another tool that in time you'll be allowed to use. When I did my thesis at university, I didn't have a computer to use a word processor. Okay, you go and pay and hire a typist.
Yes.
And just like you say, you miss one word, you have to go and get the Tipex and hope you're not changing the whole line. And sometimes, just for neatness, you have to write up the whole page. And the typist will charge you for every extra word they have to type.
You have to read it over.
You have to read it over to make sure. You see what I mean? So I tell that story to answer that question. So prepare for the fact that AI you can use it offline. If you use it to cheat, you cheat yourself. It's just like everything else. You did a calculator online. If you don't understand the root of the equation you are trying to solve, no matter how much you get the solution, if you don't know the first principles, you are an idiot. AI is the same. So you use it to augment the basics you have to help you move quickly. But if you don't have those basics, so if you go through education thinking AI is your education and you just use it without knowing the first principles of your equation, then it's a totally useless thing. It's a tool.
I just want to counter your that AI can get better to know that you're a fool.
It could be. Yes.
So
I might even give you the advice.
So you just tell you that.
AI. No, because I felt that story was important
The other
to
thing
answer
to
the
add
question.
that is that if all the classes use and all the answers will read the same.
Exactly.
And it will be so self-evident that you all become the same.
Okay. So yes. So I remember as an engineer now for Ford Motor Company, they said so that innovations I talked about holograms. Holograms have been in engineering for a long time, but they're very, very complicated, and you use lights and everything very precise to create a hologram, right? So at the time I said, cars and building cars, designing and approving cars, it's a three-dimensional thing. You can't send a CAD drawing to the executive in Dearborn in the US to approve. They all want to sit together to see the clay model.
Yes, of course.
Right? So how do you stop that and so on? I said, well, we're going to have to get through to holograms because it's not possible because the bandwidth at the time was not enough to do. Now we can transmit a hologram here. Yeah, exactly. And so suddenly what looks restricted now becomes possible through base technology to create a hologram. And now you don't need engineering. You just build it and build the hologram. But that's what the technology then allows us to do. But so what we're doing now was thought of before, but we're not able to be achieved, even with the expert systems we have. Well, because we also push the limit of connectivity and compute. But now we have the connectivity and compute we can do it. But because of what we want to do more of, we're now finding the compute requirement is so high, we're building data centers all over the place.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I must apologize. We just found out that for some reason the ability to raise your hands, was it the raising of the hands or to unmute? But definitely we apologize to those online. We know you probably have some questions, but really time is now, we want to get people out of legal asylum. So apologies to those who may have wanted to ask questions. One thing we can say is Dr. Coker is available at any time to receive any questions, or we'll probably try and arrange a visit. And in addition, you have promised that you will make the presentation available. So at this point, I know it says final remarks, but the truth is, we've really had a good session. If the truth has to be said, I really want the rest of those in the audience to clap for those who are in the front row. Past presidents here, I would normally want to say that. I would normally want to say that we should normally expect maybe 15 people per past president. But instead, they are the ones who have the hunger for knowledge, and they have out, well, to be fair, there's still a lot behind you. I guess we just describe each of you as future president. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much. And one final thing, I should thank the coordinator of Zone 1, who to a large extent has taken this almost on himself. He has done very well. And the Zone 1, we would say that this has been such a great success. Thank you very much. Thank you to the sponsors. He's mentioned the firms that also sponsored. So thank you very much indeed. We know that Zone 1 is really definitely a strong one, but I would like to say to the coordinator now that you need to still galvanize. It shouldn't be all on you or a few people. We have so many consulting firms within this zone. So we really need to make sure that we see people at this type of events. But thank you very much indeed. God bless you. And thank you everyone for coming.